ChatGPT is one of the most successful products ever created, with nearly a billion weekly users. There's just one problem. OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT, is bleeding money, losing over $38 billion in 2025. And it isn't alone. The entire industry spending like AI is guaranteed to print money in the future. The thing is, nobody has figured out how to make the math work. OpenAI is just the clearest example of the problem. Because once you add up what OpenAI earns, what it spends, and what it plans to do next, you come to a realization. OpenAI needs a miracle to succeed. When tech CEOs talk about AI, they often talk about what it can do in the future, what it will eventually do.
No job is needed. The AI will be able to do everything.
Cure all these terrible diseases, so we live much longer, healthier lives.
Country of geniuses in the data center.
Everything that moves will be robotic someday.
And yeah, I believe them. AI will shape the future in ways that we can't imagine. But the future doesn't have to be fake for these companies to fail. It just has to be late. And tech CEOs don't exactly have a great track record of being right on time.
We should be able to launch people probably in 2024 with arrival in 2025.
The end of next year, we should be able to take people into space.
But next year, for sure, we will have over 1 million robo-taxis on the road.
And that matters because while the predictions can be late, the bills can't.
We know it's coming, but with the way you buy these data centers, if you're off by a couple years, that can be ruinous.
Tech companies are spending hundreds of billions of dollars on AI infrastructure. Eventually, that investment has to start making money. And right now, the math doesn't look particularly good, especially for OpenAI.
You spent $34 billion to make $13.07 billion.
Operating a business is a game where the goal is to get your revenue above your costs, but OpenAI doesn't look like they have a winning strategy. Okay, with these AI companies, I always have a hard time wrapping my head around just how much money they're spending, so we need some kind of reference point. Because these numbers are so obscenely large that they almost stop meaning anything. So let's use humanity's greatest addiction. Coffee. More specifically, Starbucks. Starbucks has roughly 41,000 locations around the world. Add up the coffees, the frappuccinos, the baked goods. Every single dollar brought in by every Starbucks on Earth for an entire year, and you get roughly $37 billion in annual revenue. That's our measuring stick, Starbucks annual revenue. In 2025, OpenAI lost more money than that. And OpenAI expects to continue losing money until around 2030. This isn't only an OpenAI problem. Google, Microsoft, Meta, xAI, and Anthropic are all spending massive amounts of money developing and operating AI. Yet, none of them give us enough information to figure out whether their AI products are actually making any money. So what's driving these losses? The problem comes from many directions. Let's start with cost. There are two major bills involved in producing AI. The first is training the model.
There are models in training today that are more like $1 billion.
Right.
I think if we go to 10 or 100 billion, and I think that will happen in 2025, 2026.
Now, you might be thinking, how the hell does it cost so much to train one model? They use tens of thousands of specialized computer chips all operating at the same time. They're inside enormous data centers and they run for weeks or even months to train a single model. A 1 gigawatt data center uses as much electricity as San Francisco, a city with a population of around 1 million people. Not only that, when you're done training, you might not even have a product that's ready to go to customers. It's kind of like when you use AI and you don't quite get the response you want, so you tweak your prompt and try again. Except it can cost millions and take weeks before you get your next answer. And the training run is only a part of the bill. Before and after, they'd run smaller experiments and make slight adjustments. Researchers change the data, tune the model, and test whether it actually improved. As these models get larger and more complex, the cost of developing them has continued to rise. But that's only the upfront cost, because once you've built the model, you then have to pay every time somebody uses it. They call it inference, which is usually measured in tokens. Generally, the more complex the task AI has to do, the more tokens it uses. Think of traditional software subs like Spotify as a gym membership. Everyone comes in and uses the same equipment and weights. There are still staff, maintenance, and support costs, but generally speaking, adding one more customer doesn't cost very much. AI subscriptions are different. They're more like an all-you-can-eat buffet. Every time you ask the model to do something, the company has to serve you another plate. The more complicated the task, the more expensive that plate becomes. Unlike with regular software, the cost of an AI subscriber scales with their use of AI. Heavy users are the guys that come in and eat mountains of things like steak, crab legs, and lobster. AI companies need to make each plate cheaper, as we've already seen what happens when they guess wrong about how much people will eat. When GitHub Copilot launched at $10 a month, Microsoft lost more than $20 on the average user. Its heaviest users were costing the company as much as $80 a month. Now, that was back in 2023. Since then, inference has become dramatically more efficient, but we've also started asking AI to do dramatically more. This led to more tokens being spent on reasoning, driving up the cost of inference. In early 2025, Sam Altman posted this on X. Insane thing, we are currently losing money on OpenAI Pro subscriptions. People use it more than we expected. And that subscription costs $200 per month. Now, this doesn't prove that AI subs are still unprofitable today, but making money on the subs isn't enough. The company still has to earn back the billions it spent building the model and cover regular business expenses. So that's money going out. Now let's talk about the second part of the equation, money coming in. The most reliable data we have for AI revenue comes from the same Financial Times confirmed source. In 2024, OpenAI made $3.7 billion. In 2025, that number increased to $13.1. OpenAI is reportedly aiming to reach $280 billion in annual revenue by 2030, or over 7 times Starbucks' annual revenue. That would mean increasing the money it brings in by more than 20 times in roughly 5 years. This is about as much money as Microsoft made in 2025. It's also more than what Nvidia, the biggest winner of the AI boom, made in its best year. The only reasonable path now is through API calls, or metered intelligence. If subscriptions are like an all-you-can-eat buffet, then API calls are like paying by the dish. This relies on other companies significantly increasing their token spend, but things aren't looking too good for OpenAI here either. Amazon at first had a token leaderboard, then realized that employees were wasting money token maxing and pulled it back. Starbucks added AI to its workflow, then pulled it back when mistakes started costing them money. Coding might be AI's best use case, but even the AI fans on the All In podcast noticed diminishing returns on token spent on coding.
Our token costs are doubling every 45 days. What is the downstream productivity? Maybe 5% max. You need to use a lot more tokens to get to this next iteration of improvement because we've effectively already asymptoted.
On top of this, open weight models coming in from China cost a fraction of what ChatGPT charges. Artificial analysis found that K3 worked almost as well as the Frontier Lab models, but cost less than half as much. For simpler jobs, there's DeepSeek V4 Pro. It costs pennies, yet works as well as the top models from a few months ago. Think of the Chinese models as Toyota Corollas and the top American models as Ferraris. The Ferrari may be faster, and for certain jobs, you may actually need it. But you wouldn't buy every worker a Ferrari just to drive to work, especially when a Corolla can handle most trips for far less. Businesses can route tasks to cheap models for most jobs and use the Frontier models for when they actually need them. We're already seeing this with many startups switching over to Chinese models. On OpenRouter, Chinese models jumped from just 6% of all tokens spent in 2025 to about 45% today. The Frontier Labs spend billions trailblazing and discovering what's possible. The Chinese labs and open source developers follow close behind, then make a version that's good enough at a fraction of the price. OpenAI can end up in a situation where companies are using Claude for the most demanding tasks and open source models for everything else, cutting out ChatGPT altogether. And somehow, that doesn't even describe the full size of the problem. Because OpenAI isn't only paying to train and operate the models it has today, it's making enormous commitments to infrastructure needed for the amount of AI it expects us to use in the future. Data centers, the new temples of the rich that they erect to channel machine intelligence. They consume enough energy to power entire cities. Something you may have noticed is that the price of electronics have been increasing, and that's because of these guys. The components that go into the electronics, like RAM, is being gobbled up by these data centers. There are buildings that turn electricity into tokens, and as token consumption grows, we need more buildings. Otherwise, the models get supply blocked.
Additional supply depots required.
According to Epic AI, a 1 gigawatt data center costs about $38 billion to build, which coincidentally is also equal to one Starbucks annual revenue. The problem OpenAI has is if they want to grow to $280 billion in revenue by 2030, they will need access to more data centers. So OpenAI partnered with Oracle for $300 billion in compute starting in 2027, spread out over 5 years. Oracle, however, doesn't have enough compute available, so they need to raise money to build more data centers. They take this contract they have with OpenAI to the people with money and say, look, we already have a customer. Lend us money and we'll build more data centers. OpenAI gets access to the compute they need, Oracle gets a massive future customer, and the bank and investors get a contract that they can point to as proof that demand will come. But all of this depends on one assumption. OpenAI must one day make enough money to pay for all of this compute. And as we just went over, they're going to have a hard time making that money. You wouldn't build a house and rent it to someone who can't prove they can afford it. Oracle is essentially betting that OpenAI is about to become one of the richest tenants on Earth. And they aren't the only company making that bet. OpenAI has announced infrastructure and computing arrangements with several companies totaling over $700 billion, or over 19 Starbucks annual revenues. If OpenAI can't make this money, these companies are going to be in trouble. Some of them would have taken on debt to build data centers for a company that can't afford them. It's worth noting that this is happening all over the industry, which leads us to these webs of circular financing that's causing people to worry that we're in an AI bubble. OpenAI's promise of future demand helps infrastructure companies raise money. These companies then spend that money on NVIDIA chips. That boosts NVIDIA sales and makes the AI boom look real. NVIDIA and the other winners then pour that money back into AI companies and the data centers, creating a loop. This funds even more promised demand, even though no one has proven that the future profits will come. Some of these companies don't have the money up front, so they're paying on debt, and they're trying to hide it. A report from Nikkei came out finding that there's over $1.65 trillion in hidden debt. That's 43 times Starbucks' annual revenue. It exists in shadow companies to keep these numbers off the official balance sheets. What makes this even crazier is that some of this debt is being repackaged and sold to retirement funds. But that's a topic for a different video. Let me know if you want me to make it in the comments down below. So here's the situation OpenAI is stuck in. They have huge costs due to training and inference. They're struggling to make the money needed because ordinary people don't want to pay more than $20 a month for AI. Their business-to-business side is shaky with increased competition. And on top of all that, they have hundreds of millions of dollars in spend commitments, putting them on a time limit. So, how do they get out? For the situation to change, OpenAI would need something close to a miracle. Actually, it would probably need three. The first miracle is it has to reverse the rising cost of developing better AI. The industry has made enormous efficiency improvements, chips have become faster, algorithms have improved, and the cost of producing an individual token has fallen. But despite all this, the cost of doing everything keeps going up. Cheaper computation has led to larger training runs. More efficient models have led to longer reasoning processes and more tokens being spent. So the real question isn't about tokens becoming cheaper. It's whether they can start producing frontier models at lower costs. So far, the AI industry has actually moved in the opposite direction. AI progress requires more infrastructure, more specialized talent, and just more money in general. OpenAI therefore needs something more than just better efficiency. It needs some breakthroughs that fundamentally change how AI is developed. Maybe models learn far more with much less data. Maybe new tech comes out that makes computation radically cheaper. But these aren't improvements that OpenAI can assume will arrive on time. They're still unresolved tech problems. There's also the miracle where they create an AI superintelligence that surpasses humans. AI supporters act like this is inevitable and is coming soon, as early as next year some claim. But this is something we don't know how to make, and there's no guarantee that we can even do it. It reminds me of pagan rituals invoking God. If you sacrifice enough electricity and money, you'll be able to summon a machine overlord. Hey, maybe it actually happens, but I'm not counting on it. But until it does, OpenAI remains trapped in an arms race, where becoming more competitive requires spending more money. The second miracle is actually making enough money to pay for everything. Simply adding more users isn't enough. More users can bring in more money, but every extra request also means more chips, more power, and more data centers for OpenAI to pay for. Raising prices is hard when customers can move to Claude, Gemini, or open source models. What OpenAI needs is something better than a more popular chatbot. It needs a product so good that people are willing to pay premium prices for it. It needs to lead to larger profit margins, and it needs to be hard to copy. This could be an agent capable of reliably replacing human labor. It could be an AI research system that helps OpenAI improve its own models. It could be a new hardware platform or an entirely new product category. Whatever it is, that product must generate extraordinary value, and OpenAI needs to be able to capitalize on it before other people copy them. That second part isn't guaranteed. AI may transform the economy while the AI companies themselves struggle to make any money. When electricity was changing the world, it wasn't the companies that made it that benefited the most. It was the companies that used it. Ford, Westinghouse, AT&T, these are some of the titans of that generation. When several companies sell the same thing, they have to compete on price. So AI may become more useful while the price keeps falling. The third miracle is that all of this has to happen on time. OpenAI and their partners are betting big today, hoping to make money years from now. The data centers are being financed now, the chips are being ordered now, and the power contracts are being signed today. Reliable agents may eventually arrive, superintelligence might eventually happen, and AI could eventually generate hundreds of billions of dollars in economic value. But eventually isn't enough. The future being promised doesn't have to be fake for these investments to fail. It just has to arrive after the bill is due. Some ideas I had that didn't make it into the main script, but I want to share them anyways. OpenAI is trying to get friendly with the government, suggesting that they take a 5% stake in the company. If this happens, it won't save OpenAI. It would just make it so that if OpenAI fails, it passes some of that fall over to the American people. It sets up a situation where OpenAI could get too integrated to fail, so they get bailed out. Let's see if the government takes the bait. The AI industry is like selling unicorns. AI companies are buying horses, horns, and glue at premium prices, then selling unicorns at a discount. Some people are having a blast with it, but everyone is dealing with unicorn slop that's being left behind. The business model only works if one day the unicorns can produce magic. People often talk about how when AI becomes cheaper, Jevons paradox will kick in and everyone would use more AI. The same way our consumption of coal and gas increased as costs went down. But what they tend to forget is there's a demand cap.
Because we've effectively already asymptoted.
Jevons paradox came into play with things like clothing as well. When the price of clothing dropped, people went from having just 2 sets of clothes to many. But eventually, you kinda just have enough and you stop buying more. I made a whole video going over some of these ideas and more regarding AI jobs. You can check that out here. Thank you for watching.